Tony Stark, better known to the general public as Iron Man, is one of Marvel's most successful characters, and with that in mind, it may actually surprise a few fans to learn that the publisher have messed with that formula over the years. Though Stark is synonymous with his superhero alter ego, he isn't the only one to have assumed the identity. In fact, over a dozen other comic book characters have suited up in Iron Man's armor, with several even going on to foster their own superhero career with an armor of their own. It's an exclusive club, but that only makes those who have worn the armor and what became of them so interesting to look at. So, I'm Ewan from What Culture, and here's what happened to everyone who wore Iron Man's armor. Number 12, Tony Stark. The most obvious person to have wielded the Iron Man armor is none other than Tony Stark himself. The genius billionaire playboy philanthropist created the first Iron Man suit in a cave with a box of scraps, and then proceeded to take the arms industry head-on by building more with the full resources of his company behind him. Currently, after experiencing difficulty with 2 civil wars and a misguided business venture where he primarily existed as an AI, Tony is back where he belongs with the Avengers. Whether that remains to be the case on the big screen, however, is far less likely. Number 11, James Rhodey Rhodes. Colonel James Rhodey Rhodes has been a part of the Iron Man family of comics since 1979 and is considered Tony Stark's BFF. Fortunately for Rhodey, he's also a heck of a lot more than just Tony's most dependable friend, having assumed the identity of War Machine in 1992 and never looking back since. Long before Rhodey became War Machine, however, he actually took on the identity of Iron Man. He did so in the wake of Obadiah Stane's takeover of Stark's company, at which point Stark himself succumbed to a booze-fueled depressive spiral and even served as a member of the West Coast Avengers. Even after he was injured and left temporarily unable to remain as Iron Man, Rhodey took on the armor once again after Tony's apparent death, taking control of the company and continuing the Iron Man legacy as his own hero, War Machine. Number 10, Weasel Willis. In a classic case of Stan Lee's alliterative qualities, the thief known as Weasel Willis managed to get his hands on a piece of Iron Man armor all the way back in 1965, and even used it to battle Tony Stark. Before this, Willis had even posed as the real Iron Man in public, committing thefts in secret while Stark hatched a plan to defeat him. Willis didn't appear after the issue, but he was still one of the only Iron Man villains to successfully steal one of Stark's suits. Number 9, the Iron Legion. In the MCU, the Iron Legion was the codename given to the AI protocol that enabled Tony to control all of his constructed Iron Man armors. It had a different function in the comics though. When Ultimo leaves Tony Stark in a coma, it forced Rhodey to formulate a response. Utilizing older Iron Man armors, he assembles a team comprised of Happy Hogan, Edward March, Bethany Cave, Mike O'Brien, and Carl Walker. You can probably be forgiven for not recognizing pretty much any of those names, as they've had anything but illustrious careers when it comes to mainstream Marvel continuity. Hogan, although differing dramatically from his on-screen counterpart played by Jon Favreau, still works for Stark in the comics. March hasn't appeared since joining the Legion, while Bethany is featured sporadically as a member of Stark's staff in the years since. As for O'Brien and Walker, the former went on to work for the Avengers, while the latter actually played a key role in several Iron Man storylines, even coming up against Stark after he was blackmailed by Sonny Birch. Number 8, Spider-Man. Cheating though this may be, Peter Parker's Iron Spider outfit was still designed by Tony and so falls under the remit of an Iron Man armor. Stick that in your arc reactor and smoke it. During the events of the superhero Civil War, the Avengers and other such heroes split off into 2 camps. Those opposed to registering their identities with the government, led by Captain America, and those in favor of the move, led by Iron Man. Peter, despite having long stated the value of having a secret identity, ended up siding with Tony, and so was outfitted with a brand new red and gold costume. Dubbed the Iron Spider, Peter became the poster boy for the registration movement and even had his identity unveiled to the public. Naturally, seeing as how this was obviously a pretty terrible idea, Peter's loved ones ended up being targeted by his worst enemies. Exacerbating matters was his decision to switch sides halfway through the conflict, leaving Aunt May and Mary Jane with no protection and later resulting in the storyline known as One More Day. Number 7. Mary Jane Watson. Mary Jane Watson might not be the first person you think of when it comes to Iron Man, but it might actually be fair to say that the character has spent more time with Tony Stark than she has with Peter Parker in recent years. MJ starts working with Stark during Marvel's all-new, all-different relaunch, doing so at the same time Peter is heading up Parker Industries. She briefly dons the Iron Spider armor while both Spider-Man and Tony are fighting Augustus Roman, before utilizing Stark's own armor in 2016's Invincible Iron Man #9. Those weren't even the first time she's worn the armor either, with MJ having suited up on no less than 2 separate occasions in 616 continuity before All New, All Different came along. Number 6. Norman Osborn. Norman Osborn has emerged in all sorts of different guises since bursting onto the scene during Stan Lee's original run on Spider-Man, but perhaps the most inventive came during Dark Reign. No, this wasn't the story arc that saw Storm and Norman shave his hair for good, but rather one that came in the wake of the Skrull secret invasion. Osborn managed to replace Tony Stark as the director of S.H.I.E.L.D., which he then renamed Hammer, before going on to found his own version of the Avengers comprised solely of supervillains, although the director did forget to mention that part to the general public. Osborn's new look Avengers was jam-packed with evil distortions of classic Marvel characters, and so he opted to become a new version of Iron Man, called the Iron Patriot. While operating as the Iron Patriot, Osborn whips up a nascent war fever in order to justify an invasion of Asgard. This later led to the events of Siege, and thankfully to Osborn's defeat at the hands of Steve Rogers, who had recently returned from the dead. In the years since Dark Reign, Norman has opted to pursue more traditional lines of villainy, returning to his goblin persona. Number 5. Pepper Potts. The Pepper Potts of the comics might differ drastically to the ones seen in the MCU, but given the backseat Gwyneth Paltrow's character has taken since 2008's Iron Man, that's basically a good thing. For starters, Pepper and Tony aren't as romantically entangled in the comics as they are on the big screen, but they are still close. It's the kind of relationship that's led to a lot of tension in the past, but the two are also great friends. So much so that Tony created a specific armor for Pepper called Rescue, which may even be set to appear in Avengers Endgame. Pepper first takes on the identity in 2009 after becoming the CEO of Stark Industries. She uses it to search for Tony while he's made a fugitive of the law. Pepper and Tony get romantic again, and then fight Madame Mask, a recurring Iron Man and Hawkeye supervillain. As of 2019, Pepper is effectively a fully fledged superhero. Rescue is an integral part of the Iron Man family, comparable in significance to Rhodey's War Machine, and well, it's about time. Number 4. Squirrel Girl. In the same issue that would see Doreen Green take on and defeat Galactus, Squirrel Girl steals one of Iron Man's armors and uses it to fly to the moon. It's convenient that she manages to find an armor that accommodates her bushy tail, but still, there are few sights any better than seeing Squirrel Girl take to the skies in her own Iron Man armor. Number 3. Deadpool. From one zany comic book character to a whole other now. This time, everyone's favorite merc with a mouth, Deadpool. Wade encounters Tony Stark at a party and, enraptured at the prospect of being able to use some Iron Man armor of his own, knocks his host out and steals one of their suits. Drunk, aimless, and with pretty much no idea what he's doing, Wade barrels through the air, repulses firing, and even manages to prevent a nuclear plant from undergoing a catastrophic meltdown. Number 2. Riri Williams. Riri Williams was introduced by Brian Bendis and Michael Deodato in 2016, during a time in which Tony was dealing with the aftermath of Civil War II. Riri quickly cemented herself as one of the smartest individuals in the Marvel Universe at the age of just 15. Using her brains to assemble an Iron Man armor of her own from the scrap lying around at her university campus. Stark, being Stark, discovers what Riri's up to and then decides to encourage her decision to be a superhero. Riri then took on a different identity, Ironheart, before featuring heavily across a plethora of different Marvel stories. As Ironheart, Williams has become a member of the Champions and is even currently starring in her own comic, written by Eve Ewing and with art from Kevin Limbranda. Number 1. Victor Von Doom. Out of all the names that have become Iron Man, or donned a variation of the character's armor, Victor Von Doom might just be the most unexpected. Doom's switch from villain to hero in the wake of 2015's Secret Wars was already surprising in itself, but it was the payoff that made it worth it. Bendis and artist Alex Maleev made Dr. Doom Marvel's new infamous Iron Man in 2016, and it was brilliant. Doom channeled his mastery of science and magic to create his own Iron Man armor, even joining the Avengers at one point. Today, Doom is back in his old stomping grounds of Latveria, having quelled a civil war. After his time in the armor, he looks like a different ruler altogether. Who better to illustrate the transformative qualities of the armor than he?